significantly better at what he does than Josh McDaniels, is my man Scott Gilbranson. And Scott, I don't know your schedule today. I hope you got some time for me because I have some issues with these Las Vegas Raiders.
Go, man, go. I'm here for you.
And I think the two primary issues are the quarterback position and the coaching position. Since you brought up Josh McDaniels' name, let's start with him. I was all for the hire. I thought, hey, he failed his first go around, went back to Belichick. He's had to have learned something, right? Wrong, Scott. It turns out he's still an arrogant ass, as proof by the press conference when he told all of us, hey, why did you kick a field goal there with 2:15 left? And he said, well, we needed multiple possessions. No, sir, you didn't. It was a one-score game, and instead of admitting that you got the call wrong, you chose to tell us that you needed multiple possessions. Scott, tell me how this is going to get better with that dude as the head coach.
It's hard to think it will, right, D'Lo? Because you look at the situation. This isn't game 3 into his tenure. This is game 20. Okay, we have 20 game sample size now, and you go back. I was talking to somebody earlier today. Over the last 6 games, the Raiders are 1-5. Okay, so they ended last season on a downer. They won 3 in a row, and then they lost 4 or 5. Then they've now won. They've won 1 game out of 3 so far. The Denver game, which they could have easily lost, by the way, if you recall. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like it was a big win for them. Everybody was upbeat about it. Say, hey, maybe, just maybe, they're turning the corner here. But again, you get clouded in your judgment too when a team wins. So then the Buffalo debacle we talked about last week. Then you see this game with Pittsburgh, a matchup so favorable to the Raiders. This is the one on your schedule where you're like, yeah, we got to win that one. That's one that you should win. And then to your point, it was a 1-possession game. At that point, it's like a timeout in basketball. You're extending the game, right? You're going to score 8 points. Yeah, you got to get 2-point conversion, all that jazz. But remember, D'Lo, this team is number 5 in salary cap committed to the offense. Okay. A lot of money. Mm-hmm. You committed money to Jimmy Garoppolo. You committed a little bit of more money to Josh Jacobs. You have Devontae Adams. You have Hunter Renfrow. You drafted a tight end in the 2nd round. And guess what? Dude has no confidence in his offense to go do it. He denied that after they had another dude come. We went earlier in the game on 4th down. No, not all situations are the same, coach. And so I'm there with you. I think you look at the sample size of the coach, and I know we'll talk about the quarterback in a second, but it doesn't seem to be getting better. There doesn't seem to be good decision-making. And when you're the CEO of any organization, which is what a head coach is on the field for an NFL team, you have to make good choices that get your team or your business, whatever it is, further down the line. And if I'm a player in that locker room, as we heard from Devontae Adams after the game, I'm not real happy right now.
Perhaps just as amazing as that, you talk about not having confidence in the offense. I'm sorry, Josh McDaniels, can you explain to all of us, can you explain to all of Raider Nation exactly where your confidence came from that you would be able to give the ball back to the Pittsburgh Steelers offense? The lowly Pittsburgh Steelers offense with 2 minutes and 15 seconds left and be able to get the ball back. You've shown nothing this year that you would be able to pull that off. And as it was pointed out yesterday, you go for it on 4th down right there and you miss. All right, you've got them pinned.
Yeah.
Now you've got them in a significantly worse position than they would be on a kickoff. This whole thing, Scott, was flawed on so many levels. Nothing that took place, and all we're focusing on is the final 2 minutes and 15 seconds. We're not focusing on the fact that the offensive line allowed Jimmy Garoppolo to get murdered on Sunday. We're focusing, which was only a matter of time, by the way. We're focusing on the final 2 minutes and 15 seconds because that's where the issue with Josh McDaniels as your head coach is the most glaring.
Yeah, not only that, but you talk about just a complete lack of complementary football. You talked about the defense. So you tell me that you got confidence in the defense who can't stop even the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's where you want to put the game. You might not get the ball back, right? You were on the 8-yard line It wasn't like you were on your own 40. You weren't
Yeah.
pulling a Brandon Staley here, right? To your point, it was like a punt. If you don't get it, it's like a punt. You got them backed against their own end zone. Okay, then I see it. So then to me, the percentages, and you saw the stats since 1994 when they put the 2-point conversion in, no team down by 8 points with less than 3 minutes left has done what he did, and that's kick a field goal when they're down by 8 points. So again, he's breaking records in the wrong way, and it's hard to see how you get out of this because, again, he's shown who he is. And then after the game, you brought up a good point, which is own it, right? In athletics, we see athletes have tough performances, coach have tough, and what do? The good ones, they just own it. And even going back to Derek Carr as the quarterback, the guy they ran out of town. Listen, he owned it when he performed poorly, okay? Whether you liked him or not, Josh McDaniels can't do it.
No, he can't. Like, Derek Carr took responsibility for stuff that was clearly not his fault.
Correct.
Like, what happened on that defensive possession? Oh, I should have been better. Like, no, like, Derek, that's not, no. But that's what he used to do. Which brings us to the other problem that the Las Vegas Raiders have, and it's that quarterback position. And Jimmy has always been, we watched him really close when he was with the San Francisco 49ers. He's always been a middle of the pack quarterback. Mm-hmm. Like, if you made a quarterback rankings, you were going to get to 15, 16, 17 before you put Jimmy Garoppolo's name down. Not an insult. He worked on he played for a really talented coach, a very high talented roster in San Francisco. The problem is now, which is why I thought, okay, I don't love it. You probably put Derek Carr in a similar category, maybe a smidge bit higher than you would Jimmy Garoppolo. Obviously, a different skill set than Jimmy Garoppolo has. But the switch off always felt weird to me because I never thought it was an upgrade. It was just kind of like a lateral move. And now, unfortunately, Scott, it appears Jimmy's no longer a middle of the tier quarterback. He's a bottom tier quarterback.
Yeah, through 3 games, I have to agree with you. I mean, 6 interceptions and 5 touchdowns. I mean, that says it all.
Brutal.
And the key here, I want to say this because right before the season began on our show, I said, and I actually wrote a story up on Sportsnaut about it too. I said, Josh McDaniels' entire future, he's hooking on to Jimmy Garoppolo. That's where he's betting. To use Vegas terms, he's putting everything on red, and Jimmy Garoppolo's red. And if that wheel hits black, which so far it has, and I mean, it took 3 weeks for Garoppolo. And again, as a human being, hope he's okay. But it took him 3 weeks to get hurt. We knew he was going to miss games. We had no doubt. You even said that, I think, on one of my appearances here. And so now he's out. And now what is Josh McDaniels going to do? If he starts Brian Hoyer over the kid Aiden O'Connell, then the whole thing is up because you just can't go out and get rid of a quarterback you had for 9 years, which I was fine with if they were going to do that. But then you signed Jimmy Garoppolo. My broadcast partner, Mo, said he would have been much happier if they signed Baker Mayfield than if they signed Jimmy Garoppolo. Because at least Baker Mayfield had something to prove. He's got a little bit of different skill set. Not saying he's going to be an MVP or anything, but the whole situation now is completely upside down, and I'm just not sure how they're going to get out of it.
And I've had this feeling, this even dates way back when Trey Lance was a San Francisco 49er, if you can remember that long ago. Looking at the makeup of the quarterback room for Las Vegas, I feel like something happens in game to Jimmy Garoppolo. That's where you go to Brian Hoyer. It's like, hey, you have experience in the moment to get in there on short notice and go be the quarterback. If for some reason, and you talk about it took 3 weeks for Jimmy Garoppolo to get hurt, it was the first time Jimmy had gotten hit. Like we talked about, that offensive line is not good. They've been bullied around, they've been pushed around, but one thing they've been able to do, even if it's just by a fraction of a second, was be able to keep Jimmy Garoppolo upright. That was not something that happened this past week. And so the first time he gets hit, he's limping off the field, and you have concerns about his longevity, or you have concerns about his return. But with Brian Hoyer, to me, it's like, okay, in-game situation, I get it. You go with the vet, you get through the game by any means necessary. Jimmy Garoppolo misses time. That quarterback depth chart needs to be rearranged because your guy moving forward needs to be Aiden O'Connell.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to see what he has. We don't know. He looks so great in the preseason. We talked about it here on ESPN 1320 before, right? So the kid, you give him a chance. Tough game to go play to start your first game if he starts, right? In LA against the Chargers, AFC West foe, and an offense that's going to put up a ton of points on the Raiders, by the way. And so you look at that and you say, okay, well, it's a tough place, but let's see what he's got. We don't know. We know preseason stats are preseason stats. Look good, seem to have everything you need. But now, why not? Because that has to be the future. But again, even in the press conference yesterday, Josh McDaniels like, well, this isn't a preseason game, which to me said he was sending signals perhaps that he's thinking Hoyer. But I think today the pressure is on to put the kid in if Garoppolo doesn't go. And remember, Jimmy got hurt ankle-wise in the game. There was something going on with his leg. The whole concussion thing nobody knew about till after the game when it was time for him to come out for the press conference. I'm not saying anybody's lying here, D'Lo, but it's very weird.
Not. Yeah, of course.
It's very weird that he doesn't come out to face the music, so to speak, and suddenly he's in a concussion protocol when nobody recalls him getting hit hard in the head. Now, maybe he bumped his head in the locker room. I don't know. But either way, there's just a lot of strangeness, a lot of dysfunction for only 3 weeks in. It's just not good for Raider Nation.
Not that the NFL would ever lie about head injuries. So
exactly.
I'm sure everything's on the up and up there. You mentioned his name earlier. I don't think there is a more definitive moment of the early part of the Las Vegas Raiders season, Scott, than them being on Sunday Night Football. Chris Collinsworth saying, I think it was 3rd and 5 maybe. And Chris Collinsworth says, you haven't heard a lot about him so far this year, but who's really good in this situation? It's Hunter Renfrow. And as the play develops, you look around and you realize Hunter Renfrow wasn't even on the field when Chris Collinsworth said that.
Yep.
Just incredible, just phenomenal.
And you're paying him $14 million this year. Like, what's going on there? Now, I'm going to blame some of that on Garoppolo because when he is in the game, for whatever reason, he's not seeing him. He's not even looking his way. Okay. He's not using the middle of the field. I understand Devontae Adams is the outside receiver, so he's going to go to him a lot, obviously, as he did. And why wouldn't you? He's one of the best in the game. But still, when push comes to shove and you got to get the ball out, they're not finding one of their best tools. So why are you keeping him? Why? In fact, why are you keeping any of these guys? As I said, the money invested in this offense is massive, 5th most in the league. And Jimmy Garoppolo's passing to 2 people, and one of them's the running back. So there's a lot of issues here, and Hunter Renfrow's at the top of that one. They're not using him. They continue to be asked at press conferences, he's part of every game plan. Well, he's part of every game plan, then what's the problem, right? The problem is somebody's not telling the truth, or your quarterback's not able to find him or isn't finding him for whatever reason. And so there's not great answers right now up on Raider Way in Henderson, just outside Las Vegas.
Yeah, and Josh Jacobs isn't doing his fellow running backs any favors. The league leader in rushing last year just can't gain any momentum this season. And it's Scott, we like to do keys to a Raiders victory, keys to we're not creative. We're just a radio show, just like everybody else is. We create this stuff to talk about. Normally we have 3. There was one key for the Raiders. One. Thought it was super easy. If this number is a 0, the Raiders will win. And it was turnovers. Right. If the Raiders don't turn and I'll maintain right now 23-18. If the Raiders didn't turn the ball over, they would have won that game. But they were incapable of that one stat. Now you look at things just starting to spiral, and you start, this Josh Jacobs thing certainly is starting to add up now. You've got 3 games where he just can't get downhill. He can't get any motion going. And you look around and owners high-fiving each other. We did it. They're showing we got Saquon hurt over here. He missed time. And we got Josh Jacobs over here who cannot get his feet out of the mud to save his life.
Yeah. I mean, he's having trouble, but also that offensive line. You mentioned it earlier. They're not blocked. I mean, this is the same with the exception of right guard Van Roten. They have the same line. This isn't like a new line. This is the same guys. Now, you said not the best in the world, but also not the worst. They did it last year for this guy. Right now, the stat guys in the back room somewhere tell us that Josh Jacobs has people on him once he touches the ball in 0.01 seconds. It's the fastest in the NFL. So that tells you that not only is he not hitting that hole fast, but they're getting into the backfield very quickly. So the offensive line, they might protect, or at least were protecting Jimmy Garoppolo, but they're not opening the holes. They're not giving him the opportunity either, and he's not able to find the spot to run. So this is all interconnected, and it's tough because I don't want Raider Nation to just write off the rest of the year. There's things that can happen here, but you can't overcome. I've always said it. You cannot overcome bad management. I don't care if you're serving Chinese food or if you're coaching a football team. If you have bad management, it's not going to work out. And right now on the field, Josh McDaniels, I mean, it's you got to show me, man. Show me. Win games, make good decisions. Even if you lose that game, but you made the right decision, okay, great. But he's not doing either.
You're more optimistic than I. How do you think this thing can be turned around here?
It's tough to see, actually. I think it's setting up for, and you hate to do this because you can also set somebody up for instant failure, which isn't fair to the kid. But you're setting up maybe a Hollywood ending here with Aiden O'Connell. I'm not saying the Raiders are going to. I still think the Raiders win 6 or 7 games. I'm not backing off that. But it could be suddenly you get O'Connell in there. It goes down, has a great game against the Chargers. Then what do? You just paid Jimmy Garoppolo all this money. He comes back. But if the kid's got a hot hand and he's moving the offense, unlike the guy that you brought in, maybe we have one of those incredible stories where the veteran who got all the money goes out, the young kid who they traded up for, by the way, to get him in the 4th round, comes in and writes a pretty cool story in NFL history. We'll see what he can do. And I think that's what they have to do. That would give, I think, Raider Nation a lot of hope if he can come out there and perform well and say, hey, you know what? Maybe we got the guy finally. Maybe we got a guy. Instead of all these other guys who ended up washing out or have not been what the GM and the team expected them to be in the draft.
Not that he's playing for free, but in terms of like a quarterback, the Jimmy Garoppolo money is not exactly backbreaking. Like there's probably creative ways to maneuver around that. You'd hate to have that type of money on your books for a player you're not utilizing. But when it boils down to winning football games, like the Dallas Cowboys benched Tony Romo to play Dak Prescott because of the way Dak Prescott was playing, and they refused to make a change because he was playing well. We have no idea what Aiden O'Connell looks like in a real regular season situation. But at this point, as someone who covers the Raiders, if I was a Raider fan, if I was in that locker room, I might have to say, yo, you got to show me something else. You brought up the remarks Davante Adams made after the game. That's like the 2nd week in a row Davante Adams has said something post-game. And it's not inflammatory. It's not like, oh, it's like put one together with the other one and you realize something is brewing there. And you need to get this in line quickly. And Scott, I'm not confident anymore that you could do it with Jimmy Garoppolo. I'd rather they see what they have with Aiden O'Connell.
Yeah, and you know what? That's what a lot of people are saying. There's a columnist down in LA saying, well, the Raiders can't get rid of Josh McDaniels because they don't have the cash to buy him out. That's simply not true. The same can go for Garoppolo. Your point. Listen, he can stay on the roster you can put him as a backup, whatever you want to do, but let the kid play at this point because he's given the opportunity. If he goes out there and balls against the Chargers, how could you not start him? Because through 3 games, you've been unable to move the offense. You look at the Raiders, they're averaging 15 points a game. How are you going to win games in the AFC scoring 15 points a game? You can't do it. Not only that, but they can't score. They score beginning of the game, end of the game. 3 straight quarters they go without scoring a touchdown. So you have to be able to turn to the hot hand, see what you have. If this kid is the future, maybe you struck gold. Maybe you got it in the 4th round, but might get an opportunity to see this weekend if indeed that could become a good problem for this organization instead of all the other headaches they have.
The Raiders being like poor is always one of my favorite storylines every year. Like, oh, the Raiders don't have the money to do this. And I think what that's birthed from is Mark Davis, I believe, like I can't think of one. Mark Davis is the only guy in the NFL whose job is the NFL. Like that's all he has. Like he has the Las Vegas Raiders, and he has the Aces. But you know, Jerry's got his hand in 50 different things. Same with Kroenke, same with all of these other like owners. They're involved in something else. With Mark Davis, he's got the Aces, but it's essentially it is the Raiders, and the Raiders are a worldwide brand. They have the money to do stuff. They probably just don't want to do it. And that's what it boils down to with Josh McDaniels for me. Like, Josh McDaniels was the bad hire. You could put my name on the list of people who didn't think it was. It was a bad hire. It's better to move on sooner rather than later. It's compounded by the fact you seemingly had an interim coach that the players really, really loved. And you decided to move on from him, and it's gone to hell ever since.
Yeah, it has. And listen, I don't know what they do here, because how long are you going to let this go? Because suddenly, if you're the owner, okay, you don't want to, you can't just listen to popular perception and say, okay, I'm going to fire a guy every time the fans don't like it. But do they have to go 2-10 before they fire the guy? I mean, if you're not making any progress when you have that much money invested, then you start to lose players, not only in the locker room, but then players are going to want to not play in the organization, because they're going to say, hey, management doesn't have our back. We're working every day to try to get better, and this guy's killing us, and they're not doing anything about it. So what that inflection point, did it happen already? Maybe. Is it going to happen in a week or 2 weeks? We'll have to see, D'Lo, but I think that it's coming quick. I didn't think the Heat would be on this guy this quickly, but it certainly is, especially when he made it easy with the decision we started talking about, which was the field goal.
Yeah. The good news is, Scott, the two worst coaches in the league will be playing each other this week.
That's true.
It's and Scott, like I know, we've been doing this, a little over a month now. We'll teach you as we move along. When you look at life through the prism of professional wrestling, like, life is so much better. And if you just look at this as like the loser gets fired match, this is Vince McMahon has booked this as the loser gets fired. It's perfect. Brandon Staley versus Josh McDaniels, loser goes home.
Yeah, it's a good call. I mean, the fact that Brandon Staley, I mean, had he not won that Vikings game, thanks to Kirk Cousins, he might be walking home still.
He might have, as ridiculous as it sounds, he might have saved his job.
Yeah.
Or at least slowed down the process of his firing.
That's a good way to put it. Absolutely. And you're right about this game. This is the bad coaching bowl. I mean, in LA, in the Charger Stadium, that's going to be mostly Raider fans, whereas the Raider Stadium was mostly Pittsburgh fans. The world is completely upside down with West Coast football outside of San Francisco.
And that's just the way Jerry and the rest of the group in the NFL want it. This is the Raiders' lone home game of the season.
Yep.
Unless they play the Rams in Los Angeles, this is their lone home game of the season. Scott, great stuff as always, man. Appreciate you spending a few extra minutes with me here. Thank you.
Of course. Anytime. Appreciate you guys, and have a good week. And we'll talk to you next week. Maybe, just maybe, maybe Aiden O'Connell will be talking. We're going to be wearing Irish hats, drinking some Guinness, and talking about Aiden O'Connell winning a game for the Raiders. Maybe. Who knows?
If he's able to do that, I'll have a Guinness with you. And just the thought of that makes my stomach hurt. But if that happens, we'll toast one next Tuesday.
Sounds good, my friend.